Hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, and with me, as always, is my man Seth Price down there in his home office. Seth, it's been a crazy week. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on, but how's your
My
week
week
going?
is good, but I feel I have hat envy. Like I feel like I'm not worthy. I need to find a.
Well, I need to get you one of these, for the Law Firm Blueprint. I mean, the
I'm very,
reality
very
is
hat envy.
I have an 8-inch, size 8 hat. Hat. I mean, I got a big ass head, right? And I saw these online, and I was like, I can have a hat where, like, it would be bigger than my head. I gotta buy one. It was a spur of the moment, impulse purchase. I spent over $100 for this thing, but it's funny. My kids love it, and next time I'm on a stage, I'm going to be wearing this so people remember me as the guy with the crazy hat.
Very good.
So there you go. So I was traveling this week. I got out to Chicago to see my friends in DUI DLA. Actually hung out for a little while with the people from Capture Now who were there, who were great guys. And had a really good seminar. Got to see a lot of friends, a couple of members from the mastermind. Got to have a dinner with them. So I'm getting into my Seth spirit because you travel all the time.
No,
In fact,
it's
you were
funny.
just at a conference.
I don't. I do travel. Don't get me wrong. It's not nothing. But somebody was saying this the other day. I think, and this sort of dovetails. I did my first trip since the summer to Detroit for the Mike Morris Fireproof Conference. And it was the first one he was doing as a pure conference for all sorts of stuff. They had Andrew Finkelstein there. They had a whole bunch of cool speakers. But one of the cool things that I loved about it was you have like raving fans of this show. You and I sit here, do this every day in a vacuum. More people came up to me at this conference and said how they loved it. They loved the themes we're talking about. They loved how we play off of each other, how we disagree with each other. It blew me away.
Okay, so pause, folks. Before you go any further, if you're listening to the show podcast style, take a moment and give us a 5-star review. Write a review and tell us how great we are, because I'd like to actually see that. It's amazing how I don't get out much, as you can tell. I'm wearing a hat like this. I mean, the reality is I'd love to get some feedback, so you can send us an email at the Law Firm
And I
Blueprint.
get more feedback in person than anything else. Never,
Yeah.
like, it's bizarre. Anyway, but it was very gratifying. Lots of good stuff. And, all the issues that we deal with day in and day out, all these firms are dealing with. But one of the things that came up at the conference was, I think that because of this show and others, there is a perception, because we are on social, and when you flip, and you see whether it's Instagram for my law firm or BluShark, it amplifies us being there, to the point where even if you're not, there were just 4 conferences. I didn't go to any of those at the beginning of September, but there's a perception that you're everywhere, which the dream is, if you're Jay Ruane, to be able to sit with your hat in your hovel and have people have the perception that Jay is everywhere.
It's funny. I went to night school for law school, and I commuted an hour each way because I was living in Bridgeport, working at bars, hanging out with my friends. And I said, I'm going to be a street lawyer. I'm not leaving this to go to law school up in Hartford and live with a bunch of law students. I'm going to stay with my people. So I would drive an hour each way at night to go to law school. And I think it's fair to say that if I'm in your class, you're going to notice me. I got no problem speaking my mind. I'm kind of gregarious. I tend to be loud. This is probably how you noticed me overall. But what happened was, people would say, "What do you mean you weren't at this thing? You're always around." And I guess you're falling for that too.
Well,
People are thinking, "Well, of course
I
Seth
paid
was
my
at this
dues.
conference."
I have a thing on the back of my door with all of my little, speaker ribbons from all these different events. So it's not nothing. Yeah, I'm sure it's over 100 events. But that said, at this point, I've mellowed it with, if I'm asked to speak, I go. If it's just something meaningful. But it's more of a balance. And it's fascinating because that perception precedes, and then I think social allows you to fill in those gaps.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's interesting, folks, that Seth brings up the fact that he has all of his speaker tags on the back of his door. The back of my door, there's 2 things. Number 1, it is the former employee graveyard of business cards. So once somebody leaves us, I tape one of their business cards to the back of my door. It's getting up there with a lot of people on there. But it's interesting. I had an employee come to me this week, sent me a message on Friday. I'm in Chicago. I'm just getting off stage, and I get a message from him saying, "Hey, can I get 15 minutes of your time over the weekend?" And I said, "Sure." Now, normally, as an employer, when somebody says, "I need 15 minutes of your time," but they won't tell you what the time is for, it usually means they're giving you the news, "Hey, I'm leaving. I'm going another direction," and they want to break up with you to your face. So I'm like, "Hey, what's this about?" He's, "Don't worry about it. I'll talk to you. How about Monday? I'll be in on Monday at around 11. Can we meet Monday at 11?" Interesting, and this goes to something that we've talked about. So I get into the office Monday at 11 after doing my morning issues that I work on out of the office. I sit down with him and he says, "Look, I want to tell you I got a job offer on Friday." I said, "Okay." He's like, "All my friends tell me I need to leverage this back to you and get more money, but I don't think that's the move. Here, I'm going to tell you something. I love the culture that you've created. I think I'm fairly compensated. I'd like to see a growth for me. I don't think this job offer, I applied for this job with the Attorney General's office, 4 years ago when I got out of law school. I know what I have here and I'm staying. And I'm sorry if I freaked you out asking you, because in retrospect, I could see how you'd be like, "Oh, fuck, he's leaving." And I said, "Well, actually, I thought, yeah, A, you're leaving, or B, something's wrong with one of your kids. And you need to tell me that you're going to need some time off because God forbid that would happen." He's like, "Oh my God, you thought that maybe something might be wrong with my kids?" I said, "Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of culture we built here, that we're here to support your family as first." And he's like, "See, that's why I'm staying.
Well,
I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leveraging this for a
well,
raise.
look,
I hope I've earned a raise."
look, great for the J. Ruane firm, love it. But it
Yeah.
does bring up that issue that as business owners, everybody watching the show has that moment where you get the text saying, "Do you have time to talk?" And
Right.
it's like you get to the point over time where you kind of already know what's going on. Now, here it had a happy ending, rarely does. Sometimes it's
Well, I think, Seth, this was one of my employees. And now, right now, all of my attorneys, every single, well, that's not true. One of them isn't. But all of my other 11 attorneys have had other life experiences outside of my law firm. So they've either been lawyers or real life experience, ex-military, that type of thing. And so they know what they have here. I was hiring straight out of law school for years. You know this. We talked about this on the show. And I would get people at 18 months or 24 months leave because they're like, "Well, I can't stay at the first job I ever had. There's got to be something more out there." And I would get feedback from people saying, "Wow, I didn't know how good I had it now that I'm in this miserable other shop." But what I think you have brought me to the vision of, if you can hire somebody who's 2 to 5 years out, they won't necessarily have the years of bad habits that can't be fixed, but they will also appreciate what you are offering them in a good culture, a good place to work, that's less stress, that's not people screaming at each other. So I want to thank you that you got me to that point to hire people that weren't right out of law school, pay them a little bit more, and now I'm reaping the benefits of it.
that's awesome. But you know what? That brings me to a question. What positions? Because I over the years I can still go back. There are very few things I can remember as I age and memory slips. But what positions, when you get that call, are the most painful for you?
Ooh, that's, well, I mean, for me, it's the attorneys that are running a regional office that's not in my backyard. If I don't have somebody who can step in to handle that office, then it becomes stressful because you got to put a new person in, you got to manage the transfer of the clients. Maybe people are taking over parts of that geographic area, and it's getting split up. That has always been the most stressful. You
Well,
remember 2 years ago, yeah, a little over 2 years ago, I had my manager, my COO, abruptly. I was on vacation, and I got a text from a friend saying, "Hey, did you know that your managing lawyer just got appointed a public defender job?" And I was like, "I did not know that, but now I do." And so, we had to move kind of quickly and
okay, two
and
different
shore it with
categories. One is, especially if you're PI firm where somebody's taking the cases, or
oh, well, that's a whole
that's a
nother
whole.
thing.
But
Like,
to me, I put the order of operations, COO, if that were to
mhm.
happen. We had our guy fall off a motorcycle. That was not a good moment in life. And secondarily, um, for us, the accounting position. I know for some firms it's not as big a deal,
Oh,
but
I have nightmares about
and
that.
we were in the first 10 years of our firm, really maybe even 8, in the desert, we've had a single homegrown person with us for the last 10, 12 years. That said, I know you want to talk about CFOs today. I'm going to tell a story which I think is good for our audience, which is I wanted to elevate to get a controller at one point. And this was probably 6 years ago now, 6.5 years ago. And we first hired a recruiter. We then hired a second recruiter, did some of our own searches. We made 5 offers. 5 people accepted. Not one showed to the firm, all for different
How is that
reasons.
possible?
First guy came through a recruiter. The going rate was about $1.25 for a controller at the time. They told us to pay him $110. Somebody offered him more.
Okay.
Another woman came. She was bought back by her prior firm.
You would think the controller would leverage that to come back to you and
He
get
was a
more and
military
see if
guy. Somebody gave him what he wanted. He got what he wanted.
okay.
Another woman was recruited back by her own firm. Another guy we knew was overqualified for the job and ended up getting a job for $50K more before ours came through. Another lady was sort of deciding between us that she was from the nonprofit world, which is always a red flag to me. Government, nonprofit, we talked about that before.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what? I want to stay in the nonprofit world. You know, it was and you know what? And the craziest part was a friend of mine who was a similar sized firm in DC had the same thing: 4 offers, 4 accepted, nobody showed. So we ended up developing our own person internally, and the one we did have a controller at one point that turned out to be a raving alcoholic, and we ended up with one of those perfect storms. Talk about management sort of cold sweats. We had a fractional CFO, which we'll talk about in a second, and that fractional CFO, he told us the fractional CFO told him to lie to us.
Oh,
And all of a sudden, it was a while ago. And all of a sudden, we have a perfect storm because either he's lying about that, in which case he has to be fired, or it's true and he didn't tell us at the time and he needs to be fired. So he has to be gone. And now we're dealing with the fractional CFO. What do you do? Which it was just you just can't make this shit up. And those,
yeah.
which is why we ended up going with the concept of the fractional CFO world, because a true CFO is $250,000 to $350,000 a year that most
Right.
people in this listening audience aren't going to hire. You're hiring bookkeeper, maybe a controller on a good day, director of finance controller, but that's about as far as most law firms are going to get. And so you don't want to allocate the resources for a true CFO unless you're a mega firm, in which case you're
Yeah,
trying to
and
learn.
I would say that 99% of the people in our audience are never going to get to that point.
Correct.
They've
No,
got a
correct.
bookkeeper and a CPA.
And I know you want to talk, I'll just throw, verbal diarrhea here, but we've had one fractional CFO who was a local person basically just come in, totally F with us, and then didn't do the work, sent us a bill, and then threatened to sue us if we didn't pay her $5,000 bill. Another person came in, gave, totally bad advice, totally didn't execute, one of these programs that you're getting this many hours for this, and this. It has been such a bear to find somebody because you don't know what you don't know about finance. All
Right.
you want is somebody to be proactive and lead you. And what I find is, it reminds me of early days when it was both my real estate company and then with the law firm, where I learned a lesson. Never have your bookkeeper negotiate a bill. That's not their skill set. If you want to
Right.
get a bill down, either do it yourself or have your office manager do it. But your bookkeeper, the reason they're a bookkeeper is to keep numbers. They are not there to negotiate for, and they will do a terrible job at it, or it won't happen at all. And
Right.
that is sort of I've gone through these different levels of how do you get each of those pieces connected. And to me, we all need I need somebody who is going to not just what is your issue today, but help you see what you should. That's what you really want the CFO for, right? That $250 to $350,000 person is to help show you what you don't know and lead you to the promised land, and rather than what is on your mind and causing you problems. You need somebody to help lead you to where you need to be. And that's the most frustrating thing, because some of the fractional CEOs just want to come to the phone call and say, what's your problem today?
So luckily, Seth, in the last decade or so, there have been instances where people who have gotten some experience as a CFO in the legal space have been able to help lawyers, and you can find them. There's some listeners to the show who are in that space. But I had a terrible nightmare experience with one years ago who came from manufacturing. He was looking for what kind of contracts, and he just didn't understand my business. And for me, in a criminal, there's not a lot of firms my size in criminal, but we practice law, but also like sometimes it's FU, that's why, and we take cases for next to nothing because I got my nose out of joint and I don't want to back down. So it's tough to find
No,
the
no,
right
I
person
agree.
in that
You need legal
role.
specific. I get it, but just be careful. There's a lot of charlatans out there, because the moment, look, part of when I got into SEO was because there were plenty of people. The people when I started that were saying we're SEO for lawyers weren't great. A lot of them are
Right.
fraudsters. I mean, a lot of them still are fraudsters, but like I found that it was that we basically, so no, the good news is you need somebody in the space. The bad news is it's still buyer beware. Be wary, do your due diligence, and using the J. Ruane theorem, find somebody who's used the person for over a year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, it's funny. Talk about nightmares in the SEO space. I was with a friend of mine this week in Chicago. He got a call from his SEO firm who also answered his phones for him and was like, we can pre-sell your leads and help you with intake. And he asked a couple of questions of them, like, well, what are you doing for me for my 10 grand a month? And they're like, well, we're doing your phones, we're getting you leads, blah, blah, blah. And he pushed back a little and was like, well, you say you're supposed to be making me content. What kind of links are you doing? And they're like, we're firing you as a client. You have 24 hours to find a new host for your site. We're taking it down. And then he found out he doesn't even own his domain name because they had him transfer the domain name to them because it was necessary for the SEO updates. I mean, talk about a charlatan who's ripping
Wow.
people off. He's lost his main domain name that he's had since
Who is this?
2001.
You got to call this one out. What?
I know. I gave him some resources. He can
Well,
file a
if you need some
DMCA.
help, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I remember there was a
Yeah.
guy though in South Carolina that did that. People with him 5-10 years, and he was like, "Oh yeah, good luck leaving."
Good luck. Yeah. I mean,
It's a much better business model than mine.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of drug dealers. I could become a kingpin if I decided I wanted to sell crack and heroin back in the day, but I don't want to do that, and just like you, I don't want to do the negative stuff, but you can really hold people. And there's a lot of lawyers out there that can
I
get
used
through.
to see that like with immigration locally. There were immigration lawyers that made a lot of money by finding at-risk people and saying, "Oh, I know that the law tells me nothing could be done. I'll charge you $15,000," and they'd come back a few months later, nothing's going to be done. So
Right.
it's that does suck. But what else before we wrap up? What was our last topic for today?
Well, the theme really is, buyer beware. There's so many lawyers I know who just want to be lawyers. They don't want to think of that they're running a business. They don't want to think about the marketing. They're just like, let me get my files and work them. And I got to say, it's tough to run this business in this industry. And if you really love being a lawyer and you don't love the administrative stuff and the marketing stuff, I mean, I got to say, you are probably better suited to find a great job than put up with all of these headaches.
I think
Because it's what's killing
I was with
people.
some people the other day from Boston, where an owner of a firm realized that he had lost a bunch of lawyers, et cetera, and brought in an amazing operator. I think they got some points in the business. And, to me, I go to these masterminds. We got, and the number one thing that I see across the board from junior onto senior firms is the non-lawyer operator. Well, it could be a lawyer operator, but the operator inside. And to me, if that's not your thing, you've never run a business before, you've no interest in it, you're going to turn a blind eye to it. finding somebody great and paying them enough that they don't leave, and basically making sure that that's there, because you can solve 8 out of 10 of those issues with the right person if they're vested.
Yeah. Find your John Knockhazel. I mean, that's really it. Like, find somebody who has a mind for business, who wants to run a business, is intrigued by the service businesses that we offer people. And whether it's family law, trust and estates, PI, criminal, bankruptcy, whatever it is, find somebody who wants to do that and allows you to be you. And too many
Well, if you
lawyers
look
I
at
know are like,
yeah.
I get to be me 40 hours a week, and then I got all this other
Well,
shit I hate
well,
doing on the
that's
weekend.
life in business, right? I remember as a baby lawyer, I would, you would take meetings all day, and you had to start billing at 5 o'clock because your meetings were over. Now you could get shit done.
Actually, yeah,
And I think that the problem is when you start, you're not paying enough to get the right person to do
right.
that. And the rule of three, you don't even know what you need.
I mean, the reality is most people who launch a law firm are truly undercapitalized, and so they're scraping by, and that's just the way it is. It's funny. I have a lawyer I know here who's about to launch a practice, and she texted me and she said, "Hey, can I ask you some questions?" So I said, "Sure, no problem." I answered her question, and I said, "So how are you holding up?" And she said, "I am stressed and overworked." And I'm like, "Yeah, and you're launching your firm in a couple of weeks. Wait till you see what your life becomes."
And look, I think the secret to success of our firm is that I find people who don't want that, who got the Jay Ruane speech. Literally interviewed a guy today who was a prosecutor for quite a few years, been on his own for 4 months. You could just see it. He's like, I just want to try cases. This is not for
Yeah,
me. And that's our avatar. Because if you find those
yeah,
people, that's how you build your firm.
absolutely. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us this week on the Law Firm Blueprint. Thank you for taking some time to spend your time with us. Of course, you can catch us live every week, live on LinkedIn and live in our Facebook group, the Law Firm Blueprint. If you're not a member, you should join it at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, live on Thursdays. And of course, be sure to give us that 5-star review and give us a good review. Tell us what you like about the show. Tell us what you don't like about the show so we can avoid that in the future by giving us a review wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for being with us. He is Seth Price. I am Jay Ruane. We are the Law Firm Blueprint. Bye for now.